Deconverted Man here. Alright, it's time for an in-shout to Sogenrise. Yeah, Sogenrise for making the animated Deconverted Man thing that you just saw, and also the animated outright live phone, and all of that. So Sogenrise is awesome. Thank you for doing that, Sogenrise. Sogenrise. And now that I've done that, it's time to analyze another video. Here I go.
We're here with Mike Shoesmith of PB Simmons. Mike, what do you think is the greatest dilemma of modern atheism?
The greatest dilemma of modern atheism? Well, that's a great question. The atheists are not slow to remind the world of the great atrocities that have been done in the name of religion, and many of their points are quite legitimate. However, they more often than not neglect to mention the great atrocities done in the name of atheism.
So let me answer your question by a red herring. Yay! And also outright lies, because Stalin and others did not do what they did in the name of atheism. So that's not true. Get your history right. But it has nothing to do with the actual answer that you eventually give. Can you please just give the answer?
If we could sum all that up, these are atrocities all done in the name of evil, right? Whether it's for religion or for atheism or whatever, these are atrocities done in the name of evildoers.
Okay, so half-truths, possible outright lies about the history of Stalin, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day anyways, because it's all done in the name of evil, which it isn't done in the name of evil. So that's not really exact history anyways, but none of it really matters because it's all one giant big red herring anyways. Answer the question.
But the greatest dilemma facing modern atheism today is a logical fallacy, and it's a fallacy called the converse fallacy of accident. So basically, in my discussions with atheists, they refuse to acknowledge the anecdotal evidence because they say that no God exists. That's the presupposition.
So the question of what is the modern atheist dilemma is answered by a straw man. Why am I not really surprised by that? But, okay, let's examine this straw man and see if any of it is logically coherent within the framework of the straw man that it is. So, atheists supposedly pre-assume that there's no God. Okay, and then, because of that, reject anecdotal evidence. Alright, okay, so that's the straw man. Here's the problem, though. Let's just say that the anecdotal evidence is about aliens from outer space that have kidnapped cows. The atheist might also reject that. So then does the pre-assumption become that there are no aliens? Or is the pre-assumption that they just haven't visited Earth? Couldn't we really use this on any anecdotal idea out there and just say, well, their answer to that is to pre-assume that the thing doesn't exist, and to just construct straw man anybody and everybody into our pigeonhole where we want them to be? Well, you answered that question the way that you did because you're just assuming that the answer that you have is right. So, yeah, this is the problem with straw men, of course, is it's set up so that you win, but it doesn't really work because if it was true, it would be true across the board every time, which means all anecdotes about everything would count. And we will discover why that's not the case in a moment here, because anecdotal evidence, which you can label it evidence, but it's not evidence, but anecdotes, that means a personal story about things, is not going to count for the atheist, but it is going to count for the theist. So we'll see that contradiction in this video, and I'll talk about that when it happens.
They don't like to admit that they say no God exists, Yet we have millions upon millions of people who are giving anecdotal evidence, and anecdotal evidence is real evidence for God, folks.
So I want to stop examining the straw man for a moment and talk about antidotes. They are not evidence for anything. That's the problem, okay? So the initial straw man was that atheists supposedly reject antidotes for God, even though that part's left out, because they assume that there is no God. Alright. So I reject a personal story about God because I am asserting that there is no God. That's the straw man. He is asserting here that antidotes are evidence for God. But then antidotes would be evidence for anything and everything all the time across the board. And if they're ever not evidence for something, then there's a contradiction in this idea, and then the idea fails. Which, in logic, antidotes are not logically coherent. So, no to antidotes.
And these are real experiences that people are having. But the atheist says that these are not real experiences. They cannot be real experiences because they themselves have never experienced it.
So remember, antidotes need to always work all the time, or the system idea that antidotes are evidence for anything collapses. So do note that that also means if I lack an experience of something, that in and of itself is an antidote for that something not occurring.
Now, here's the dilemma. For them to be intellectually honest, they would have to say that there is a possibility that these experiences are true, they are valid. There is that possibility. And that would make them an agnostic. They would have to give up the atheism.
Hey, remember that video I did on meme, you're not an atheist, you're agnostic? Yeah, go watch that video if you don't remember. So, this is an irrelevant point and another red herring. So what? I don't care. What's your point? I still wouldn't believe in God. So, see, the thing is, you're saying, you want me to say that I don't know if there's a God, not that there is no God, which is exactly what I do say, but then you complain because I'm using the word atheist, and you don't want the word atheist to mean what I want it to mean. You want it to mean something else, and I want it to mean this, so we're arguing about a freaking word and its definition. And I don't care. I really don't care. If you want atheist to mean purple penguin catapults, then fine. That's what it means now. But you know what? I get to say that atheist doesn't mean that. It actually means pancake, porcupine, lobster. That's what it actually means to me. And we have our own unique idea of what this word means, and perhaps we could try to clarify that by a modifier, like Deconverted Man's version of atheist and this dude's version of the word atheist, or whatever. I don't know. But, yeah, it's the natural language problem. It's a red herring. It's irrelevant. Who cares what we would have to call ourselves, even if this was true, which is not true because words and concepts change all the time, and we humans change them. But, okay, setting aside this irrelevancy, what does this have to do with the problem that you're saying that exists? That isn't a problem, because the idea that antidotes are evidence isn't true in the first place, because there's a contradiction in that if I don't have that experience, that is an antidote of me not having an experience, therefore that experience has not happened. If antidotes always are evidence, then that's how that works, which means there's a contradiction because I'm saying this isn't real to me, and you're saying it's real to you, and I'm saying, great. When it happens to me, then I'll believe it's real. It hasn't happened to me yet. I'm waiting for it to happen to me. Okay. That's the problem with the whole antidote thing, is it's dismissible as readily as it is presentable.
Now here's the dilemma when it comes to the fallacy. The converse fallacy of accident is the same fallacy that says, Because I have never seen a black swan, no black swans exist. That is a fallacy. That's the converse fallacy of accident.
What's interesting about the black swan fallacy was that the idea was we have not observed swans that are black. And somebody somewhere said, therefore, there are no black swans. What they should have said is, as far as we have observed, we have not observed a black swan. Now, that doesn't mean that there were none at the time. What it does mean is there are none that we know about. That would have been a way to avoid the whole fallacy. But it got invented and it became a fallacy that was propagated and well known. And it is sometimes referred to as the black swan fallacy. Okay, so if I have not seen a black swan, I should say I have never seen a black swan. I should not say that there are no black swans, but what I am saying is I have not experienced a black swan. So for me, they are not something that I can stop being skeptical of. Now, I'm using that in an extreme methodology. Nobody should be skeptical of swans because we actually have reason to think that there are swans. But nonetheless, I'm just using this as an example, okay? So the person that comes and says, but I have seen a black swan, has experience that I lack. For them, the black swan is real. And I'm like, fine. When I see a black swan, then I will believe that there are black swans. I have not seen one yet, so therefore I'm going to remain where I am, doubting that they exist, because I cannot just take somebody's word for it. That's what an antidote is taking somebody's word. Now, in this case with the swans, it's not that big of a deal to take somebody's word and face value, because I do have evidence that there are swans, and swans are possible, and it's possible that a swan could be black, and I know based on evolution that if there is an environment where black would be favored, then there will be a black swan. So I have reasons that I could agree to this proposition, but perhaps I want the person presenting the idea to not just say, hey, there's black swans, and me to buy that, but instead present to me reasons why I should think that there are black swans. Perhaps I want them to shoulder the burden of proof for whatever reason. That might be a thing that I might want them to do.
So the atheist says, because I have never had an experience with transcendental realities, supernatural realities like God, then no transcendental realities exist.
And again, even in your construct straw man scenario, that would be perfectly valid, because you are saying that you've had an experience of the black swan, and the other person says, well, you know what, I haven't had an experience of the black swan. So black swans don't exist. Well, black swans do exist. I've had experience of them. That's great, but I haven't. So if we're saying that your personal experience is what makes something real, then the fact that they haven't had that makes it not real to them.
That is the converse fallacy of accident. That is the great dilemma facing modern atheism. They have to give up the atheism in order to accept reality, that the possibility exists that these anecdotal evidences, these experiences that are being talked about around the world, are in fact possible.
And none of that is true. And I'll go into more detail in a moment, but I just wanted to say that none of that is true.
When they finally admit that rational platform, which says that these experiences are in fact possible, even though they themselves have not experienced them, that means that they are not being intellectually honest when they don't accept that.
The idea being presented that if something is possible, we cannot say it did not happen, is, I think, a ridiculous idea. So it's possible that while he was sleeping, I snuck into his house and moved everything slightly to the left. Just a little bit to the left, just like a marginal oomph to the left, just a little bit. It was like a micro move that I did on it. It was just like not even an inch to the left. You can barely notice it. But I know that I did it. He can't say that I didn't do it because it's possible that I did it. Even though I don't know where his house is. Oh, but I've got burglar alarms. You don't know where I live. Yeah, but is it possible that I did it? Yeah, it's possible. So you can't say that I didn't do it. And my antidote is that I did do it. I am telling you, yes, I totally went into your house and I moved everything slightly to the left while you were sleeping. Or maybe you weren't even there when I did it. And I didn't leave any fingerprints or DNA behind somehow. I got in and out without breaking any locks or windows. I was very clever about it. And it's so slight to the left. Everything is, most everything. Not everything, but I moved like all the furniture slightly to the left, okay? Make it a little bit easier for myself, all right? Yeah, it's possible. But I think it's safe to say I didn't do it. Why? Because you have no reason to think that I did do it. More so because I haven't given you any evidence that I did do it. So me saying, well, I did it, isn't evidence that I did it, and the idea that it's possible doesn't make it so. And I don't think that the idea that it's possible makes it something that we can't say, no, that didn't happen, either. I think that we're allowed to say, no, you didn't really do that, and no, that didn't really happen. I think that we're allowed to say that in cases of extraordinary claims, especially ones that cannot be verified by any other means other than the story, which in itself is not a verification process. A story is not verifiable because the person could be lying, they could be mistaken, or whatever. So just because it's possible doesn't mean that it is. And just because it's possible doesn't mean that we can't say that it didn't happen.
They're hanging on to atheism as a religion at this point because the only intellectually honest position apart from faith is agnosticism. I hope that answers your question.
Well, thank you, Mike.
So, once again, watch the whole meme, you are not an atheist, you are agnostic video. I don't know why that's important. Like, that's some sort of victory for the theist to win. Like, get the atheists to call themselves agnostic. I mean, okay, let me just ask that question theoretically. What would happen if every atheist started calling themselves agnostic? What would then be the point? I mean, what would change? Like, would they be like, yay, we won? I mean, okay, we still don't believe in God, so what's the problem? I mean, we don't believe in God now. I guess they don't want us to say that there is no God. And they're asserting that we're saying that there is no God, even though we're not. And I guess they don't like the idea that we're trying to change the word atheist, I suppose. Which, again, I talked about all that in my meme video. So, I don't know. I don't get the point of this. But at any rate, let me talk about the antidote thing. Because the real reason is not what he said. What he said is nothing but a straw man. The real reason has nothing to do with my lack of belief in a God. The reason I don't accept antidotes is because antidotes are not evidence. That's why. It doesn't matter what the antidote is. It's not evidence. Period. It's not. Okay? Now, if you want to talk about what some people call spiritual or supernatural experiences, fine. People have those. Yes, people have experiences. But are they supernatural? That's the question that I want to answer. How would I or anyone go about testing to see if it was supernatural? Well, perhaps we could monitor their brain will they experience something supernatural, something magical, mystical, some God experience. And we could see what's going on inside their brain, and then we could compare and contrast that to controlled conditions of the same person or other people, and we could get some sort of idea of what the brain looks like when it's experiencing this versus what it looks like when it's not. Okay, so based on that, we then would form other tests and things like this, okay? So it's all been done, by the way, by my friend that he's not really my friend, I don't know him. Andrew Newberg, I know for sure has done this. I don't know if others have done this. I really hope that more people start doing these sort of things. But what we have discovered so far is that, yes, people have stuff going on in their brain when they think that they are experiencing God. But we can also get people to meditate to do that without God and get the same lights to light up in the brain. And we can also induce that with chemicals. So the question is this a chemical experience? That is to say, is it nothing more than what we would experience because that's how our brains work anyways? Or is it supernatural? How would we demonstrate that the supernatural is the agency that is causing the experience? Without a test of some sort to establish what the agency is that is causing the effect and the result, we cannot declare what the answer is. At best, we have something unexplained, and at worst, we have an appeal to ignorance. I can't explain it, so it's got to be God. How do you know that it's God versus your own brain? Somebody was saying to me, I've heard God. Great. How do you know you're not schizophrenic? You don't. Unless you go to a psychiatrist, psychologist, combination thereof, and get psychoanalyzed to figure out whether you're schizophrenic or not. And even then, because psychology is still a soft science, we might not know for sure. We just might have indications that you are schizophrenic. Okay? So, until the day that we fully understand the brain, whenever that day comes, we might not be able to make a complete 100% or even close to it diagnosis. And even when we do understand how the brain works, we may never have 100% certainty, because that's not really a thing anyways. But nonetheless, we might be able to say for a reasonable degree of certainty that you are schizophrenic. But let's just say right now, internally speaking, if you are hearing a voice that is not your own voice, you might be schizophrenic. Whether it's telling you to do bad things or not, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just telling you nice things. But you still might be schizophrenic, or at least partially schizophrenic. How would you know? You couldn't know. And that's the point. If I personally am schizophrenic, I would hear voices that are not my own. Now, that would creep me out. And I would immediately institutionalize myself and try to get help for it. I would see psychologists, psychiatrists. I would try to get the voices to go away. Because I'm going to assume that it's a natural phenomenon. I'm not going to assume or think that it's demons or spirits or God talking to me. And worse, if I think it's God and it turns out that I'm schizophrenic and the voice tells me to kill someone and I kill them because I think it's God, that's not good for the person I killed and their family and friends, and it's not good for me because now I'm in jail, perhaps awaiting death because of what I've done. Or maybe I am locked up in the schizophrenic hall, but I'm never going to come back into society. So that's bad. So the problem with just assuming that you can make your own self-diagnosis about what's going on in your brain is that it can lead to very, very, very bad consequences in the very real world that we live in. What is the most telling is not the video. What is most telling is actually the text comments that this guy has made. He said in response to somebody that said, well, then we should all be Hindus, because we got way more Hindus claiming personal experiences than we do anyone else. I mean, they're doing it all the time. They're having experiences. And he said, well, Christians believe in other gods. That was just an outright lie, and I was like, no, that's not true. Maybe you do, but most Christians don't. I mean, I totally get that, trying to tell whose doctrine is right is impossible, but the majority view of Christians don't think that there are multiple gods. They think that there's one God. And the majority view, I'm pretty sure, is Trinitarian concept of that God, which you could view as multiple gods, I suppose. But they don't think that there are other gods besides that particular God. They just don't. So I was like, wow. In order to defend this idea that's ludicrous, that antidotes are evidence, he now has to lie about what Christians themselves believe. And I don't know, I'm assuming that it's him that responded in text format. He might not be the person in the video. That is to say, it might be uploaded by somebody else who is responding as if they are him. So I don't know. But at any rate, I don't buy into antidotes because antidotes are not evidence of anything ever, period. If you want to say that something has happened to you, I believe you. Something did happen to you. Now, the question is, how do I or you tell that something was natural versus anything else? If we don't run a test, then there's no way to know, period. End of story. Thanks so much for listening. Unless and until we have a logically coherent argument, or logic in general, or, empirical evidence or a repeatable test, we have to be skeptical of the conclusions.